I'm Lisa Bonise, your host, and my guest for this session is Dr. Velma Love. Our topic today is ancestral memories and medicine stories, myth-making practices for cultural healing. Velma Love, PhD, is the founder and president of Story Catalysts, LLC, the only story change company that leverages ancient African wisdom symbols and systems, proven true through the test of time to catalyze personal and social transformation. Dr. Love is an author, ritualist, story coach, and ancestral lineage healing practitioner. She's here with us today. Velma, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure is all mine because your work is it's so interesting to me. And you've got a wonderful book out called Divining the Self, a study in Yoruba myth and human consciousness. I would love it if you tell us a bit about your book and what was your impetus for writing it?
So I wrote the book. Actually, it came out of my dissertation work. I was really sort of enthralled with the idea that there was a sacred text called the Odu that I knew nothing about until I started talking with the diviners of the Ifa Orisha tradition. So this village in South Carolina was established in 1970 for the practice of a traditional African spirituality. I went there, introduced myself, and got permission to interview people. And those ethnographic interviews served as the basis for the book. But the one thing that actually stood out in my mind, and I guess I interviewed maybe 20 or so people, was one diviner who said, when a client comes for divination, all I'm doing is telling them the story that they are living. And that's really really sparked something, turned on a light for me, and really began my whole research effort around how stories, and in particular, sacred stories, shape the lives that we live.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I totally understand how that spark where you just sort of wake up to this whole new way of looking at life. So let's talk about then the backstory to your becoming a certified ancestral lineage healing practitioner, because that seems sort of different from where you were heading, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yes and no. So it's kind of a long journey. I say my journey to being an ancestral lineage healing practitioner started when I was born in the Southeastern United States, born in a Black body during the era of segregation. So I grew up asking all kinds of questions about social justice. The civil rights workers were my heroes, my mission, my vision, my destiny. When somebody said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" My ambition was to grow up, become a justice worker, get arrested, go to jail, go to jail for the cause. I thought that was the ultimate. So I never went to jail, but I did go to college, and I studied sociology, and I studied everything that I thought might help me find some answers for this justice work. From sociology, then graduated, did community development work, did community arts work, directed a youth organization, and ultimately landed saying spirituality as an answer. So I went to seminary, got a master's of divinity, and then went on and got a PhD in religious studies, then got initiated in the Ifa Orisha tradition, because there was an emphasis on ancestral reverence. So all of that then was part of the trajectory that led me to becoming a practitioner and being certified. So somewhere along the way, I heard about Daniel 4 and the book Ancestral Medicine. I bought the book. I tracked Daniel 4 down. I wouldn't take no for an answer until I got an audience with him to find out how he put the system together. And then the rest is kind of history. I started doing the work myself, and it was so transformative for me that I felt that I was called to actually become a certified practitioner. So here I am today.
That's wonderful. I love the way that that you start out telling the story about being very young and sort of feeling into this, that you sort of knew that this is what you wanted to do and what you wanted to be. And it almost feels like you have an awareness that you chose to be born into the circumstances you were into, because some work can only be done from within. Is that accurate at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think everything in my life, in the Orisha tradition, we say we choose parents, we choose circumstances because we come to earth with a mission, with a gift to give. So in order for me to give that gift, all of these circumstances were part of that decision. I think that happened in the spirit world before I was born. So yes.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I find the most interesting, as a white-bodied person speaking to somebody in a black body, is with ancestral healing. I know that there are challenges that people of color face that white people don't, where the records just don't exist, and maybe stories got passed on through the generations if they were able to. What are your thoughts on how to break through that barrier, if somebody is wanting to do the work but is just discouraged right off the bat that the records just don't exist? How would you advise them?
Yeah, I have that all the time. I have clients who say, well, I know a little bit about this line of my family. I know nothing about these other people. And these other people, I don't even know who they are. But the ancestral lineage healing work that we do is not based on cognitive knowledge. It's based on entering into a semi-trance state and asking to communicate with the spirit world. So we're trying to draw information actually from those ancestors. So quite often we hear people talk about, we honor the ancestors. That's actually a pretty common part of African American culture, is to say we call their names, we honor them. But in the healing work, we go beyond calling their names or even having an altar with their photos. We are actually saying we can communicate. And that is based on some assumptions that say, one, there's a continuity of consciousness after death. Two, not all dead are equally well, that there can be troubled spirits. Hence, we emphasize protection and we emphasize healing. And three, the living and the dead can communicate. So if the consciousness continues, then it would follow that the living and the dead can communicate. And then four, the living and the dead impact each other. So there is this opening up of a different way of knowing the ancestral work, then actually ushers a person into a way of knowing that they probably are not familiar with, because we are taught in a very linear way, and we're taught, to rationalize and to remember. But this is a different kind of memory. It's reconnecting, and we say it's repairing the broken pieces.
Right, right. Well, so in your experience, what have you found to be, I guess, the main reasons that people will come to you for ancestral lineage healing, or what are some of the common questions that clients will ask you?
Yeah, people come for different reasons. Sometimes a person will come because they are trying to find their purpose or their path or their way, in life. So they may say, well, maybe I heard about this ancestral work and I'm wondering, if there's a way that this work can help me kind of know who I am and what I am to do. And I say yes. And actually, one of the ways that I represent the work is through a mentoring program I call Life Path Mentoring, where I work with the individual in a particular way with their ancestors to ask those specific kinds of questions. So we have that. And then we have people who say, I know a little bit, but I feel like there's something missing. Like I don't have my full story. I had like one of the most interesting things, fascinating things that happened to me was a young man, 18 years old, who found me through Instagram and went to my website booked a discovery call. And when I talked to him and I asked him what brought him to me, he said, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. I don't know who my father is. I didn't grow up with my mother. When I read your material on Instagram and on your website, it made me think that my ancestors were sending me to you. So that was fascinating. So people are looking for ways to find themselves and to anchor themselves, and really to just improve their lives, and that's what happens.
Yeah, yeah. And I know what you're talking about. Sometimes your ancestors, they just push you forward, and you might not be aware at the time that that's who's behind it, but you eventually do discover that they've been nudging you along the whole time. Well, I love that the story that you just told, because it implies that imagination really plays a role in ancestral healing. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And that is often a question that a client will ask. Well, how do I know that I'm not just making this up? Maybe I'm just imagining this. And I had a client who was a PhD in history, African American history, and she came to me and she said, "Well, I know, I've been pouring libations to my ancestors for years, but I haven't done what you're talking about. I haven't had this sort of intentional dialogue that you say is possible." And so we started working, and she stopped in the middle of it and she said, "Well, I see, I mean, there's the stuff happening, but how do I know it's not just my imagination?" And my answer was, "Is imagination a part of you?" Yes. Then use your imagination, because you're sitting in your office in a chair physically, right? You're sitting in your office chair at your desk. So how can you get from there? You have to imagine, go into your mind's eye and imagine, allow your imagination to transport you to another place. So she said, "Okay, I'm just going to follow your instructions." She did that. And we did a couple of sessions. And then she was so excited. She said, "Oh my God, I know I didn't make this up. There is no way I could have made this up. This is like a movie unfolding before my eyes." So I get that quite often. And I say, just, relax, get out of your way. And remember, we're talking about a different way of knowing, because we are accustomed to one kind of mind function. And what we do from the beginning is say, okay, move the energy out of your head. Just come on down, move on down into your body, and let's go. So, yeah, imagination plays a big role.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that story. I think that's really a perfect example of what we're talking about here. So now, on another note, what do you say to people who say to you, "Oh, that was all a long time ago. How is healing the ancestors going to help me now?" How do you explain this kind
Yeah,
of work to them?
that is a common question. And then I tell people, well, epigenetics research shows that just as we inherit physical traits from our ancestors, we also inherit emotional traits. We inherit wounds. We carry gifts. We have legacy gifts, and we have legacy burdens. And what we want to do then is actually heal ourselves. It's because kind of a misnomer. We use the term ancestral healing, but it's kind of a misnomer, because we are really actually healing ourselves in partnership with the ancestors. And that sort of answers the question like, oh, yeah, well, I can use that. I can improve my life. And we all want to flourish. And so when I'm able to help people make the connection between the ancestral healing work and personal flourishing, that answers the question. Yes.